I'm Melanie Swayze, a global real estate advisor with Gibson Sotheby's based in Metro Boston. I closely advise homebuyers and sellers of all stages of life, guiding them to intelligent, winning decisions.
I'm Derek Lumpkins, a real estate investor with a background in community organizing. I also enhance equity and inclusion initiatives at companies and organizations, and I guide leaders through executive coaching.
When we get together, we dive into the intersections of culture, class, mindset, and Black freedom.
Welcome to the Blacklining Forum,
a podcast about Black wealth, power, and land.
Derek.
Hey, good morning.
Greetings.
How's it going?
I'm happy to be alive as always, Derek, and happy to be in your presence.
Likewise, always good to see you and spend time with you. And of course, always good to see and spend time with all of you who are watching and listening as well. So thank you for joining us again. So we are, I don't even know how many days away from the election. I'm just going to jump right in this week.
Maybe 22, 23?
Is it even that many? I don't know, but by the time people hear this, it'll be a lot less.
This is true.
It might even be like 10 days or so by the time people hear this. So, of course, the things we're talking about now are pertinent right now. Like, think of this as a snapshot in time, but things will probably evolve and change, hopefully for the better, or hopefully, in a good way over the next however many days by the time we get to
23.
23 days. Okay. So it feels, I won't say it feels like we're on a knife's edge. And, what I'm referring to specifically is the upcoming American election. So it is October 12th. Yes, the presidential election is October 12th, 2024. The next presidential election is on November 5th. I think it's on the 5th, it's whatever that Tuesday is. And so, the polls are tight, and the things that we're thinking about and talking about also feel like they're on a knife's edge. And, this particular episode is part 2. It's a follow-up conversation to the one we had just before it around the election. And in our last episode, we spent quite a bit of time talking about power. And one of the things I really liked about our conversation last time was that we actually were pretty good at naming the sources of power, the evolving sources of power, both in Black America and just generally in the world. And when I say the world, I mean climate change as being a force of power. The power of Mother Nature is undeniable. And so I really appreciated the fact that we were able to really focus on that, because I feel like in a lot of previous episodes, we just haven't been able to really figure out, like, where does power lie? It's been kind of diffused, it's been kind of hidden, or it's a systemic power where it's harder to say, okay, this is where the power lies. And so I really like the fact that we were able to drill down and sort of lay a few things out in a different way.
We are always trying to line up our conversation and our considerations around how Black people, Black freedom is influenced by power, but also by wealth and land. And how do we think about how wealth and land for Black people might be impacted? Impacted. Could be improved. One can hope for improvement from this coming election. What happens next? What happens in the political climate, the social climate? What happens in civic life? And what happens in economic life?
And also the actual climate as well.
Precisely. And the literal climate.
So when I think about that question you just posed, like, can we start by talking about the climate, actually? Like,
always.
The climate, like the weather, like, the climate change, can we actually start with there?
Yeah.
Because I feel like we have referenced it in previous conversations. We referenced it, or say you alluded to it in the last episode. And let's actually talk about it. I mean, climate change is here, and you don't have to be a resident of Florida. You don't have to be a resident of North Carolina. And I actually read, I think it was in the New York Times, someone was saying that we all live in Florida now.
Yeah.
Just the way things are coming, the way things are changing so rapidly. I mean, think about it. The climate is changing in a human lifespan. We're talking about things that used to take, in the span of geological time, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years, and now things are changing in a matter of decades. And so when we think about the power, yeah, sure, there's political power, there's social power, there's other types of human developed power, but then there's the actual power of Mother Nature and climate change. And I posed this question to you off camera last week, but I was thinking, what is the value of ownership of land, of property, of buildings, whatever, if that land is either too dry to farm on or too dry to live on, too wet to farm on or to live on, or it's eroding, so you just have less of it and it's eroding steadily. So you see that in a lot of coastal communities, especially in New England and in California, you see a lot of that. Will land even still have value as climate change continues to either degrade it or erode it or flood it? Like, will mobility actually be the new wealth?
All very good questions. Let's start with, well, one thing is that we're pre-election as we're having this conversation. We're also still early relatively in the hurricane season. So we're likely to see more. I truly hope that what's playing out in this historic hurricane season is a reckoning for all of us, because there's likely more to come. This was predicted to be the most active hurricane season in recorded history, and it's playing out that way already, and like dramatic hurricanes.
You're active in the sense of, sorry, just a question. So active in the sense of the number of hurricanes or the intensity of hurricanes?
Both, because the water, the oceans are so hot at this point. So we saw larger hurricanes in the summer than we've ever seen in history. If you remember the Caribbean over the summer, Jamaica got slammed, but some of the smaller islands, lots of people lost life. It's hard to have that conversation in the United States because it feels distant. This is going to feel less distant. And I agree that we're all Florida. It is all happening right now. And one thing that's not going to erode, Derek, is capitalism. Okay. So you're asking, is land still going to be worth something? Yes, land is going to be worth even more. But I also think that land is going to be, its value is going to be in some way proportionate to access to clean water, and access to flood insurance. And this is just a new territory that I don't think we're contemplating in everyday life, but it's always in the back of my mind. And I think it's also in the back of minds of people who are buying property. People who are buying homes now are like, is this in a floodplain? We don't even know what a floodplain is. These flood maps actually get rewritten from time to time, but the government is not up to date on those. So we really don't know. Plus, the actual climate is changing right now. Plus, there's no models that exist for us to predict and map out what's going to be safe ground, safe territory, if you want to call it that. So we are all Florida, and we just don't know it yet. And what I think that means is that there's going to be even more of a premium on land that is not going to be devastated by water rising. But ironically, you're also going to need access to water that has not been contaminated. Okay. So, and access to places where water actually is reliable, like actual water supply is reliable. So, I mean, I think what we're talking about is a big shift. This battle around this election is a battle about demographics. It's a battle about who is the United States, who does this country represent? But I think that the climate impact is going to change demographics faster than we've seen ever. And that's going to be the new determinant of where power lies in terms of what, at least what we've come to understand is often power lies in big metropolitan areas, right? That's where a lot of the resources are, economic and political power. Might that get dispersed in a different way? We already see that the way that we thought about metropolitan areas as being the center, the hub, has been starting to diffuse just since the pandemic, just since people don't have to live right where they work. They don't have to commute into a place of work. That is changing what the power of a downtown is. It's changing what the government capital is, right? So all of this stuff is shifting. And I think at the bottom, that just the ground level battle for day to day for people who own property. Don't even know what to say about people who don't own property, but people who do own housing. How secure is the thing that they own? And I think the question you're asking is what you own going to still be worth as much given wherever it is you are? And I would say probably that is going to be answered in proportion to how well you can insure it and who can afford to insure it and what places in the country insurance companies are still going to want to be vested in. To be honest, I think we're going to see conglomerations of insurance. Even I think a lot of insurance companies, this is already happening in the southern United States. Insurance companies are bowing out of the business. They're leaving the industry because they cannot afford to cover the level of catastrophe that's playing out from flooding, from fire. So this is real stuff, man. And we just literally do not know. So what we do know is capitalism is doing its thing. You might say it's collapsing, it's eroding, but it's having its effect. We're having to wrestle with it. Right? That thing is continuing. And then we also just know that we all don't know how to navigate what's coming, and that ideally we have some kind of structure of institutions, usually in the form of government, that hold people accountable to one another civically. That's what we're trying to protect. Democracy, but also reassurance that there's security, there's protections in place, there's a FEMA in place, there are institutions that can help keep people in a net. And so, yeah, I think all that is in the balance right now because we know Project 2025 throws all of that into question. The EPA, the National Oceanic and what's known as atmospheric administration, right? All of these things are critical to our everyday lives in the background. Well, we have to think about it in a very foreground way right now.
Yes. And
that was mouthful.
It was, but it was good. It was good to sort of like look at the biggest environment possible. But I think so. I like where you're going in terms of talking about capital as it intersects with climate, which is an interesting combination of things.
Yeah.
But so when you're talking about capital, you're talking about the value, the value of my house in terms of like, will it still be worth a sale or a purchase or insuring or all of that? But there's also another aspect of value is it worth it to actually rebuild this house? Is it worth it to stay in this location? Is it worth it to move to another location? There's also that aspect of value too, because I was watching the news just today where they were talking to people who in Florida, I don't know what town, but this is the day or two after Hurricane Milton just tore through. And they think they were talking to people who were in the tornado zones, not in the flood zone. And so they were like, I've been through 3 hurricanes in 2 years or something like that, or like 5 hurricanes in 3 years, some like very amazing number of hurricanes in a short amount of time. And they're saying that they're moving out. And there was something about how I should have, really written this down, but the news report was saying that, Florida had a 12% increase in people moving down post-pandemic, and now they're seeing a lot of people beginning to move out because of the changes with the frequency and the intensity of the hurricanes, because they don't see value in staying there anymore. And so the person they spoke to was from Illinois. So, and she said that she has a job waiting for her back in Illinois. So she has some aspect or some level of security / stability waiting for her, even if she leaves her house. And she's 60 years old. So, I mean, like she still has, time in the labor market and time in the retirement period of time as well. But I'm just kind of thinking like, if this woman, she's a mature woman, she has some savings, she has ability to move, she has ability to rebuild because she has rebuilt in the past, but she's like, this isn't worth it. There's no value in this for me anymore. Because at some point, when you look at the scale of things, or when you look at the meter and sort of say, okay, which way am I going to go? You have to decide. do I stay and we do this again, or do I value my life and my freedom and my safety more? Like, you kind of have to look at those two things and make a decision. And so, yes, I think the capital aspect of value is certainly there, because you have to be able to afford to either stay and you have to be able to afford to leave. You have to make that choice. But also, which do you value more?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wonder if that's going to become less and less of a choice, you know? And so I don't want to be catastrophic in my thinking, but we are talking about catastrophic level unfoldings. These are reckonings. They're reckonings that are going to show up in the economy in an everyday way. We're talking about worried about inflation now. This is next level stuff from climate impact. So these are reckonings economically and therefore politically, and socially. And so I think, yeah, more and more people are going to be forced to move. And can they afford to make a move that's going to keep them economically stable? Truly. And so it seems so mundane, but I'm literally saying that if your neighborhood is devastated and you can't afford to stay and hang out and figure out what's going to happen, right? Or try to help rebuild, you have to go. What can you take with you? And if you own something, can you capture some of its value, its previous value, to help you move on to someplace else? Because wherever you go else that's less likely to be impacted, it's probably going to be more affordable and less accessible. And I think we just have to be real about that. Everyone is already trying to figure out where's the place in the United States to move. You and I have had this conversation just in our DM messaging, right? Like, would it be Michigan? I mean, well, we're not the only ones having that thought. Also,
No.
Michigan is struggling. Like, their water source is being squandered by the West Coast, right? So there's all these converging and countervailing factors in play because of climate and because of our lack of honesty about it and our lack of preparedness about it. And that's why I think, besides just democratic rule of law, period, and what falls under that, like, freedom of the press and so on, besides securing that, I think the kind of life or death level questions and concerns that hang in the balance are all about how are we going to respond to, because we can't actually stop the climate impact at this point. Maybe we can blunt it, but more than anything right now, we need to be prepared to respond. And so we need institutions to allow us to do that in an organized, systematic, and systemic way that benefits all. That's, I think, more important than anything. And like, wars are there will be wars over resources like this, over water.
Already are. I feel like there have been for a long time. I mean, that's why borders are the way they are. Like, if you look at the border of Massachusetts with Connecticut, it's a straight line except for one little divot that goes around a lake.
Yeah.
That had to be around water resource. There's no other reason why Connecticut would be like, yeah, just claim that Massachusetts, no problem. Right. There has to be some reason for that. But I am thinking about what you just said around safe harbors and safe places to move for climate. And for a long time, I mean, the early conversations around climate change and where people can go to be safe, Vermont and Western Massachusetts were two places that got mentioned. But, not so long ago, Springfield, Massachusetts had a tornado. And it was actually because it happened during rush hour. There were cameras trained on the roads, and you could actually see a tornado forming over a river. I mean, it looked like something out of a Hollywood movie. It was incredible. I had never seen a tornado actually in formation anywhere, let alone over an urban area. So at first I was like, am I really watching the news, or did I turn to a drama, or is this like a commercial? Like, I was confused by this.
I actually never saw that footage. I love that you actually watched the news, so you have this imagery in your mind. There's that. Yeah. There's also the major flooding that happened in the Montpelier region of Vermont, I think 2 summers ago. No one ever would have seen that coming. We just don't know. And can I also say something you said earlier that set up all of this like complexity of questions about capital and what can you take with you and who has mobility and what is mobility worth is also really grounding this in the land. All this stuff we're talking about relates to zoning. It's, as you say, the human overlay on the land. The land is not really business with us. The wilderness is not really business with us, right? The the forests, the lakes, the rivers, the oceans are doing their thing. We're impacting them, but they are moving and doing what they do almost in spite of us and our whims. So we have these lines that we've drawn like, well, this is a safe territory and we're going to go here, but not across there. That's foolishness. At some point, we're going to have to reckon with that. All the ways that we've been basically discriminatory about who can move across what line. I've been listening to a number of podcasts recently that in some way or another make reference to or center the experience of indigenous nations, American Indian nations, and reservations. And man, not only do these communities know how to actually work with the environment, the natural world, the woodlands, the lakes, the rivers, the streams, not only do they understand how to strategically burn forests so that you don't get forest fires, for example, but they are going to be impacted in significant ways. Like, is the government ready to actually keep reservations protected from big climate impact? Like, all of this stuff is just nuts to me. I think it's going to shift the ground. All these lines. I say the reason I'm mentioning reservations is because there are treaties that say this line of demarcation in this canyon belongs to you all, and the rest belongs to the federal government. Okay.
Are we really relying upon treaties? I mean, come on, the U.S. government and treaties with
that too. But all just to talk about the arbitrariness of treaties and zoning when it comes to big forces of nature moving through, as they're going to do. What do we do?
Right. So actually, so you mentioned a couple of times, what is government going to do? We need robust government. How's government going to protect? How's government going to inform? And so since we are talking in I don't know if this is the shadow of an election or in the foreshadowing of an election, whatever it is, there's an election coming. And by the time this airs, the election still will not have happened yet, even if some people may have started voting early. And so I went and started looking at what some of the campaigns are starting to talk about regarding climate. And I'm saying campaigns because the candidates themselves may not be talking about climate, but their campaigns or the campaigns around them. So let's just say conservative and progressive versus Democrat and Republican, because, it's more than just that. But they have information out there. So I'm just going to do some quick highlights for viewers to watch. And if you're watching, listen to. But also what I'm saying now, again, is a snapshot for right now. So go ahead and look at what you find in the time that you're listening to this and see what's evolved, if any. So on the more conservative side, specifically when it comes to Project 2025, under the title or the subheading of government efficiency, so there's a bunch of proposals. They recommend privatizing government functions, including the National Weather Service and the National Flood Insurance Program. They call for the wholesale overhaul of the Department of Housing and Urban Affairs. So if you have anything, which I think is supposed to be housing and urban development. So this information I'm getting from factcheck.org. So there might be some errors in what they fact checked or how they're reporting it, but this is what they wrote here. So in HUD, if you're a renter or if you're a homeowner, or if you intend on becoming a homeowner, will have some effect on you. So basically everybody. Project 2025 also calls for the dismantling of NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So they conduct research and they issue reports on climate change. And they say that many of NOAA's functions can be eliminated and sent to other agencies, privatized, or placed under the control of states and territories, which, again, the climate crosses all of these state lines and territorial lines. So we should be working together, not as these one-off agencies. Anyways. And Project 2025 also calls to eliminate or overhaul the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations and the Office of State and Community Energy Programs. They recommend the elimination or reform of the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. So that's what's happening on the conservative side. On the more progressive side, I did go to Kamala Harris's website. And unfortunately, I look specifically for climate. And unfortunately, the language there is very vague. It says that she will unite Americans to tackle the climate crisis as she builds on this historic work. I don't know what this historic work is. Advances environmental justice, protects public lands and public health, increases resilience to climate disasters, and then it goes on to talk about energy costs, and jobs, and holding polluters accountable. But it's very vague. There's no specifics. There's no talking about the billions of dollars here or the strengthening of a department there. So I went one step further. I looked at the Inflation Reduction Act because assuming that she continues to support the Inflation Reduction Act or decides to enhance it in some way, I sort of looked at that. So there was a 2023 Princeton University study. So again, just before the IRA, I think just after the IRA had gone into effect, that said that the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, will dramatically cut U.S. carbon emissions with economy-wide emission reductions between 43 and 48% below 2005 levels by 2035, but not enough to reach the 50% below peaks at 2030 as we had pledged as a country. And then NBC News. I'm sorry, this is a bit wonky, but this is kind of important for
You're a wonk, Derek.
I can be. I didn't think I was this much of a wonk until today, but yeah. So, and then with NBC News, they said the climate bill earmarks $60 billion for environmental justice initiatives in disadvantaged communities that are disproportionately affected by climate change. And that includes $3 billion in grants to promote clean and accessible transportation and $1 billion for clean buses, garbage trucks, and other heavy-duty vehicles.
Important and basic, but yes.
Important and basic. And what I thought was interesting about all of this, both from the conservative side and from the more progressive side, is how they don't actually talk about people. So they're talking about buildings, they're talking about economy, they're talking about infrastructure, they're talking about things, they're talking about the non-sentient things. They're not talking about people. They're not really talking about communities. It's great to hear $3 billion here or $2 trillion there or a new road or lower emissions. That's great. But how do we actually take that? How do we as voters, or even if you don't vote, how do we take that as residents of the country? Because I don't want to say citizens, but residents of the country, or just people who are alive. How do we take this somewhat dry information? Because that was part of the reason why we decided to have these conversations around the election. Because all of the stuff that I'm seeing on the news, I think it's just dry as hell. It's just dry. It doesn't really get it down to a point where I, as a person, can be like, yeah, I'm 100% behind this, or I like that, or this sounds great, or I can really
to people I know.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just dry as hell. It's dry as hell. And I'm like, somebody got to do something on the side that I support, which is the progressive side. I think that's pretty obvious. But let's really like say this is what's going to happen, because it just all feels so abstract. And 43% of reductions of the 2005 level by 2030. I'm like, what is that going to do?
And not much. Not going to do much, but yes, continue.
Right. But also, like, do I need to go out and buy some trees and plant a tree in my backyard? Like, what else needs to happen? Because, yes, we can lower reductions. Yes, we can talk about, cutting this program or building up that agency, whatever. But are we actually doing enough? How comprehensive is this? Because it still feels very piecemeal. It feels like the pieces are enormous.
Yeah.
But it still feels very piecemeal. And so it's like, what can we do? Like, why aren't we being asked as residents to do more? Like, think about JFK's statement, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Somebody, do we need to go out and buy some trees? Do we need to go out and plant some grass? Like, what else do we need to do?
I appreciate that. I appreciate that kind of very New England can do mentality that you bring into this. Yet these problems are so ginormous that they actually need to be changed. They need to be addressed. And people need to be protected on a systemic level. It's not, I mean, one of the things that's been breaking my heart in the last couple of weeks, and this will show the kind of nerd I am, is I am fastidious about composting, reusing, recycling. I am just anal about it. And, at this point, California, thank you. California is always keeping us on the up and up. Is I think they're suing Exxon. Is it ExxonMobil? Which, petrochemical company, because they, for the last probably 50 years, have had us duped into thinking that we can actually recycle our plastics.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out most plastics actually cannot be recycled.
Nope.
Okay. So we're creating all this waste that we can't even make ourselves feel okay about by putting it in a certain bin and thinking and hoping that it'll get sent somewhere, which usually means being sold to China, but China's not buying our recycling anymore. So we don't even know where this stuff is going. We're praying it's not going into the ocean. It is hard. It is hard to know that there's not a thing you can do in your own little house by yourself. But this is big. It's bigger than individual. And I do think individual is critical, just if for no other reason, for our mindset to be plugged in and thinking about others and thinking about the environment. So critical. But what we need to do is cutting back so much fossil fuel use. We need to be rebuilding the electric grid. There's so much that needs to happen. So to my mind, Inflation Reduction Act and any other kinds of big initiatives that come out need to be not just about getting people jobs, but about rebuilding infrastructure, and infrastructure in a way that is flexible, recognizing that people are going to have to move. Like literally, the way that we built neighborhoods and communities was all around the highway system, which was all around cars. And so we're talking about big level, like if we're talking about making change in a way that actually is going to have an impact on both protecting people and cutting back the impact on the environment, it has to be government level. And that those were government level decisions that created the suburbs, that created the highway system, that created big auto. So we need to actually redo. And so I do think a Green New Deal, I'm like, we need a massive Green New Deal. And I think we're going to be forced into that by the climate's doings. I just think we're going to be forced into it. So it may not be in this election cycle, but I think that that's what hangs in the balance for us. I don't know that. I mean, I want to see intelligent policy that might come out of Kamala Harris administration if she's not mired in trying to appease all kinds of, opposing audiences and constituents or commitments, I'll say. If she's not just kind of held in place because she can't actually be seen to be bending in one direction or the other.
But do you not hear the
Derek,
what's that?
This is high level, high impact stuff that I don't know. I think individually what we can do is make sure we have important leadership in place and that we're holding leaders accountable.
Right. But do you not hear, so it's interesting that you say that we, everyone who's not in government, we are all going to have to be prepared to move. We're going to have to be prepared to
government. People.
Sure. But I mean, just the way, maybe just the way I'm hearing the way you structured the sentences, but it sounded like you were saying that we have to be prepared to move. We have to be prepared to respond to climate. We have to be prepared to do this, that, and the other. But Kamala Harris might be held in place. The climate change is going to impact her decisions as well. She can't be held. I mean, I suppose she could be held. Politics could hold her into place. But at some point, Mother Nature's going to be like, no, Kamala, you got to move too. So, and I don't mean move physically, but you've got to move your policy. You've got to do something else in order to have whatever your other policies are, your other goals, or your other whatever responsibilities you have in terms of the safety of people living in the country to be insured, you've got to move things differently too.
I think we're saying,
or if it's not her, it's going to be Donald Trump, one or the other.
I
Like,
think we're saying, but also, Derek, you're talking about 4-year term. So there's going to be a lot of impact, whatever decisions get made or don't get made in the next 4 years. But I think what we're talking about, I keep saying big level. I'm not finding the right kind of term to like match the gravity and the scope of the enormity of the scale of issues that we're talking about that really do hang in the balance for all of us. All of these forces that are converging right now. We're hoping that whoever our next leader is of this country, and therefore of much of the world's experience, like it's the impact on much of the world's experience, we're hoping that they are one that kind of pushes us through a portal that gets us more on track to start making good decisions. Or we might end up in a different portal if we have a different leader in place that makes things fall apart faster. And so I guess what I'm saying is that we can't say that things are going to be fixed in the next administration, but we're hoping that we still have a pathway forward, because every moment right now counts. It is so critical. It's interesting. I'm sitting here and trees are like blowing outside of my window. It's everything. Everything feels so, I don't know, consequential right now.
mm-hmm.
And I think it's good. I think it's actually, I think it's a kind of blessing for us that these storms are coming fast and furious. It's so serious that we have to take it into account. Everybody has to take it into account. We have to take it seriously. For a long time, I've wondered, what is it going to take for the right to stop lying about climate change and to stop investing, for example, in oil and fracking? What is it going to take for them to stop? Because I don't actually believe that a lot of those people who are making a lot of money on the fossil fuel industry, I don't at all believe that they don't believe in climate change. And so when I'm like, what is it going to take for them to feel like their bottom line is devastated, their bottom line is at risk, their livelihood, their family security is at risk? What is it going to take too much to get for them to be held to account? And in the meantime, so many others who are so vulnerable are going to be, pushed by the wayside. But I think it's actually good for us to be all living in Florida right now. I mean, I don't politically want to be living in Florida, but I'm just saying it's good that we're all realizing, oh my God, that can happen here. That can happen
Metaphorically living in Florida.
Metaphorically living in Florida, that there is no safe ground. And I think that's important, because I think that will help us get really honest about what we mean to each other across territorial lines, state lines, and it'll get us, I think, more honest about what we need in our leadership. I hope.
It's good to have hopes. I think you're probably right. There probably are some people on the right or conservatives who do believe in climate change. I'm sure there have to be. There can't be 100% of the people on the right or 100% of conservatives can't not believe. But
They're
in
not
terms of your question,
want to make money how they want to make money.
Wait, say that again?
They are not misinformed or ill-informed. I think they just want to make money the way they want to make money, and they want the government to be out of their business, out of their pocket. That's, yeah.
Right. Yes, as most people do, whether you're progressive or you're conservative, you want government not to bother you if you're something that you feel is right.
Yeah.
But I think, thinking about your question, what's it going to take for them? So I remember watching Dulce Sloan. I don't know if you know who she is. She's a comedian. So she's a comedian who I saw on The Daily Show when I was watching Comedy Central more often. She does some stand-up as well. And she was responding to some reporter's question about what's it going to take for people to change, or for conservatives to change or something. I didn't hear the full question. And she says, you have to F with their money. The only time people change in a capitalist system is when you F with their money. And so I think your question is kind of a similar question. Like, what's it going to take for folks who either don't believe in climate change or who are ignoring climate change. What's it going to
Claim
take?
not to, believe
The
that.
rest of us have to stop participating in the system in a way that still gives them money. So I think that does lead to sort of some of what you were talking about before, like we need to stop investing so much in things that need gas and that need oil. We need to switch to different forms of energy, which is not easy when we're talking about a country of 300 plus
And that's
billion
why
people.
some government regulations in place. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've never, until these couple of conversations in this series here, realized that I'm so pro-government. But it's because we take it for granted. And we actually need a functioning government.
Yes.
Civil servants who are wonky like you, nerdy, they put their heads down, they're going to work every day, they are delivering, they're gathering information, they're helping make informed decisions. That's important for all of our security. And so whether you're talking about people who are making sure we can actually vote and have our vote counted, or people who can report out reliably about how to respond to, the next disaster. All of those workers are important. Their work is important. So as you say, Derek, too, like people, the government is not just an entity. It is a mass of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who go to work to help make sure that our daily lives have some semblance of order and security. And I just think, wow. That's part of what this election is about, is protecting not just their jobs, but the institutions that they serve, period.
And making sure the communities are functional. So literally 20 years ago, I'm thinking about this now, I was talking to a coworker / friend who I think was just before another election. I think maybe before Clinton. No, maybe it was one of the Bush elections of 20 years ago. I can't remember at this point. And he was like, maybe it was the first Obama one. But anyways, he was saying, oh, what do we need this for in government? Why do we need this for? And I'm like,
fools. You wait.
Well, no, like, so I didn't quite go that far because I wasn't as wonky then as I am now, but I was saying to him, we do know what it looks like when you don't have government services. He's like, what do you mean we know that? I'm like, you don't have to go far. You can just go to some islands in the Caribbean, or you can even go to some places in not Central Asia, but South Asia, where you don't have postal service every day. It doesn't come to your house. You have to go somewhere, or you have to pay to send your children to school. You don't just have free schools. Or, you don't just get your roads fixed. You don't have fire departments. You don't have functioning police departments.
Okay.
You don't have to go far to find models to see what the outcomes would be here if we took away the things that we have now and turn the US into a country that is similar to what you're describing. He's like, oh, no, our country would never become like that. And I'm like, I don't think it would be that hard. If you said, because we already have areas of the country where you don't have fire departments, that volunteer fire departments, or the places where, like, if you pay, you get service. If you don't pay,
water, pick up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, trash pickup. Yeah, all kinds of things.
Or even a water delivery, honestly.
Yeah. Clean water delivery. Because again, Flint, Michigan had water delivery, and someone said, let's save some money and switch from here to here. And they got what they got, unfortunately, like disgusting water. But it's happening in Illinois, it's happening in Arizona, it's happening in all kinds of places. There's places where you can literally take a lighter to your faucet and the water burns because there's so much natural gas in the water. So, I mean, you don't even have to leave the country anymore to find these examples of what happens when you take away government protection and some services.
Basic. I'm so glad you gave that very real life, everyday, basic example. But it makes you shudder that we're having to actually think about it in such stripped down, bare terms. But we do, because that basic protection is hanging in the balance right now. That's what's at stake. And maybe things do have to get that rough for us to wake up and recognize what we've been benefiting from all along, and therefore is worth protecting. We're going to find out.
But we're already there. We're already there. I mean, we are already there. There already are people who are in situations that are that rough. It's just that there's
No,
still
what I
a
mean is
lot of us.
in this next administration, like who we have next is going to determine, can we start rebuilding and enhancing these protections that we're talking about, or are they going to get further degraded? I think so much has already been privatized, and we're already seeing some of the changes from the previous Trump administration. And so I just think, wow, man, um, stuff might just have to get a little bit rougher. And what's hard is that we know that roughness is going to be more devastating, of a more serious and severe impact to people of color, but especially Black people and immigrants, um, and largely in coastal communities and rural communities. Um, what do you do? What do you do? But be mad, hold your leaders accountable, make sure to vote, and keep having these conversations.
And we have to figure what we can do as well. I mean, I know that this is a macro level.
Yes. Okay. What can we do? Well, like you say, stop buying things that could support fossil fuels. But I'm gonna just be completely sincere right now and say that with how fast capitalism moves, how fast our lives move, right? I shop at Amazon more than one would expect, right? I get deliveries probably every other day from Amazon, right? That's
every other day.
frequent. I mean, I don't have time to go to a store. I don't have time to slow down and go shop for something. Or local stores aren't carrying things anymore. Even a Whole Foods isn't carrying things anymore. So
Right.
much being pushed to buy things online. We're being pushed to buy on impulse. And I'm not saying that to say that I'm incapable of making different choices. What I'm saying is that the way that the economy is structured and the way that our life and time is structured has us making decisions that are frankly bad for us, big picture. And I'm just owning that that's one place where, even though I compost and I really do buy my food local to the best of my ability and support local farms and all that, still I'm implicated. So you're saying, what decisions can we make? We can make some of those kinds of consumer decisions for sure. But besides that, I think this is big level stuff that we need institutions to be functioning well for us to be able to address in an effective and systematic way.
Yes. And I will also pull part of a quote from one of our previous guests, Dr. LaTanya White, where she's like, what's your vision?
Yeah.
So, it's great to say, yeah, we want to hold our leaders accountable. We want to hold government accountable, but we also need to have vision individually, familially, and communally, because otherwise we can say, yeah, we're holding you to account, but it's like, to what?
For what?
Oh, I think we also have to think about that, and also think about not the vision for today, like how can we make today better, but how can we make it better in 5 years or 10? How can we, no, not make it better. How can we prepare for 5 years or 10 years down the line? Because 5 years and 10 years down the line will probably not look anything like it is now.
Changing so fast.
Things are changing so fast, and it's so dramatically.
Yeah.
And and it's, in a span, like I said, things are not happening glacially anymore. They're happening in the span of a human lifetime. So, but anyways, I don't want to end on such a gloomy note.
Well, what you just said, sort of plunged, a feeling in my heart, which is, our vision. What is our vision individually and collectively, whether we're talking about for our family, our neighborhoods, our networks of friends and other loved ones, is what do we value? And I think this is what a time where things are burning and flooding out, to think about, what do we actually value? What's the thing we're willing to fight for? And on whose behalf we're willing to fight? But what are the values? I think I'm leaving this conversation with that question on my chest, on my heart.
No, it's always on my mind. What do I value? Who do I value? How do I value things? How do I express that I value someone? So, I think that actually is a good way to end it, for us, and also for those of you who are listening and watching. Think about that for yourselves. What do you value? Again, the election is weeks, if not days away by the time you hear this. So think about not just what your values are, but what you value and what you value for the people around you who you know, but also for those of us around you who you don't know as well. So that's it. Thank you again for listening. We look forward to any questions or comments that you might have. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Black Lining Forum. Take care.
Take care.